Haroon. Right, we're going to start with Jadon Sancho. Borussia Dortmund are interested in signing the Manchester United winger on loan. Right, Harriet, give us a background to this.
A bit of a timeline of events. He signs in 2021, 73 million. And there was so much excitement about him coming from Dortmund. He'd had a really successful spell there, played 82 times for Manchester United, scored 12 times as well. And then it all came to a head with Erik Ten Hag, the manager, and he's not played since the 3-2 win against Nottingham Forest. Ten Hag basically criticised how he'd been in training, and that's the reason he gave for not selecting him in a squad. Sancho, of course, came out famously on social media and refuted those allegations, said that he'd been used as a scapegoat for a long time. And since then, there's not really been a resolution. They released a statement, the club, in September, saying that Sancho would be on a personal training programme away from the squad pending a resolution of a squad resolution issue. And we still, months on, don't seem to be any closer to the issue being solved. He's in a contract at Manchester United until 2026, and they have the option to extend that as well. So at the moment, it feels like they hold all the cards. However, having said that, the longer this drags on, the more his value is going down. It doesn't feel like, under Erik Ten Hag at least, he is going to be playing as a Manchester United player again anytime soon. So the options now that are coming up are a return to Dortmund, which we'll go on to speak about, but it's been a saga that's dragged on for a long time and doesn't seem any closer to finding a resolution.
Nubaid, does it seem like if he was to go out on loan to Dortmund until the end of the season, would that suit everybody?
I feel as though it's probably the best solution. He's been at Dortmund before, he knows what it's like at the club, he knows the people at the club. Obviously, the management has changed, but also the fans adore him in Dortmund, and he had a very good spell there. As for Manchester United, I think they've got a player there that's just not worked out. At this moment in time in January, they're going to get back the same fee, probably not. He goes to Dortmund, if he plays well, they can probably get a larger fee come the summer. And then I think for Sancho, he just needs game time. I think a lot of people have suggested that maybe he's not interested in playing and things like that. I think the reality is he just hasn't worked out at Manchester United. He goes to a club that he knows quite well, gets game time, everyone's happy if it works out, obviously.
Yeah, what does everybody at home think about this Jadon Sancho situation at Manchester United, possibly going out on loan to Borussia Dortmund? Give us your thoughts. Hashtag transfer talk on X. Right, Kwaku, from Sancho's point of view solely, how much does he need this? Whether it's Dortmund or someone else, how much does he need to move?
He needs a fresh start. When we're talking about talent levels of English players, he sits on a table with Bukayo Saka and Phil Foden, just in terms of pure ability. We saw the trifecta of him, Haaland and Bellingham at Borussia Dortmund. That was one of the most exciting trios Europe has ever seen. But it hasn't worked out for him at Manchester United. He needs a fresh start. Obviously, we know about the breakdown of communication between him and Erik Ten Hag. And as a result of that, he's just not had enough football this season. He's played 3 games, all off the bench. Last season, obviously, he was involved in a lot more, but he wasn't the Jadon Sancho that we saw at Borussia Dortmund. So a fresh start in a country he knows very well, a club that the fans really still do love him, I think is the best for all parties, for him and for Manchester United. But as a player, I want to see Jadon Sancho get back to where he was, because he was one of the most exciting players we've ever seen at that age. And you look at his age mates, look at the players that he was compared to, they've gone on to achieve incredible things. And I think there's still a player in there, and Jadon Sancho, who just needs to find the right club for himself.
It's interesting that it's looking like a loan, because I wonder whether that's from the club perspective, from Manchester United, whether they think if they sold him now, they wouldn't get the value for him from the player that he's worth. Because you speak about the talent that he has there, he's not been able to show that for quite some time. So if they opted for a sale now, do you think maybe they wouldn't retain the value that they got for him, or is it a loan option better for him? I don't know who this worked out best for, rather than a permanent solution.
It's always difficult to do deals in January, isn't it? In terms of, you know that so many players away because of various tournaments, whether it's the Asian Cup or AFCON. So to do a permanent deal for a player of the quality of Jadon Sancho, who may not have bought for a lot of money, invested a lot of money, and it's difficult to do. So loan makes sense at this point in time, but obviously United want to recoup as much money as possible for Jadon Sancho.
There's no doubt he's a quality player. We were talking, Kwaku, when the investment comes into Manchester United, there is talk of a new kind of policy coming in. Just explain what that policy may be, and when you do, surely it doesn't apply to someone of Sancho's age.
Yes, so Melissa Reddy actually reported last month that Manchester United will implement a more ruthless approach when it comes to the process of player contracts and getting rid of players that maybe are surplus to requirements of the club. Similar to what Arsenal did when it comes to players like Ozil and Aubameyang, players that were maybe the other side of 30, had higher value contracts and the manager didn't fancy anymore. They were pretty ruthless in terms of terminating those contracts and moving on from those players. Jadon Sancho doesn't necessarily fall into that bracket. He's still only 23 years old. He's a player that has a lot of upside, and if he finds the right club, he can perform at the highest level. Man United can maybe recoup some of that high transfer fee that they paid for him. But it's an initiative brought in by Ineos to revamp Manchester United's whole recruitment process and revamp the way Manchester United go around doing business. And so if you look at players like Ozil and Aubameyang, they had served Arsenal they'd been players that had won trophies for Arsenal and been central to Arsenal being successful. Sancho's not quite at that level in terms of what he's achieved at Manchester United, so it wouldn't apply to him, but you can understand why, with this new ownership group coming into Manchester United, why they need to revamp things, because we've talked ad nauseum about how Man United are not great at selling players or buying players, and their ability to get rid of massive contracts is a huge part of that as well.
Yeah, and Nubaid, I think you've been looking at some of the stats surrounding Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, so Jadon Sancho, as we just said, is an interesting proposition that Manchester United have at the moment. I think the perception around Sancho is that maybe at Manchester United he's not delivered. I'm more of the opinion that he hasn't probably had the opportunities. You can see here he's played 82 games, 12 goals, 6 assists. On the face of it, you're probably thinking, for a winger who came with so much potential and such a large fee, he hasn't really delivered, considering at Dortmund he had phenomenal stats, and also the system suited him at Dortmund. And what you'd find here is, in 137 games, 50 goals, 64 assists. I mean, those stats are exactly what Manchester United paid for. But if you look a little bit deeper, and this is where I think he's been very, very unlucky, in terms of 90s played per season, what this essentially means is the minutes he's played divided by 90. It just doesn't map out very well for him. If you look at his Dortmund, you have 8, 27, 25, 23. And at Manchester United, you've got 21, 19 and 1. Considerably lower. And the problem that he's often had is when he's bought into the side, Manchester United have been in turmoil. And in reality, a lot of Manchester United players have ended up in a situation where most people don't think they're at the level that they need to be. Unfortunately for him, he's ended up in that situation as well. He's only actually ever played 7 league games straight for United. That was when Ten Hag first came in. If you think back to that period, that was the defeats against Brentford and Brighton, the 6-3 against Manchester City. What can you actually expect from a winger that's come to a league that's, again, expecting so much of him, and then also in a team that's expecting so much, but a team that's underperforming? At Dortmund, even in his final season, when the feeling was that he was going to leave, he played 15 games straight in the league at a certain point. In those games, 7 assists, 6 goals. So this isn't a guy who's suddenly just forgotten how to play football. It's probably a guy who's come into a club under lots of pressure. He's under pressure. The team have got a new manager. It wasn't working out. Just think back to Manchester United losing to Brentford and Brighton. I think most people were sat there sort of saying, this team isn't good enough. They haven't got a style, etc., etc. And then you've thrown in a brand new winger. So I do feel for Jadon Sancho in the sense that, yes, the stats don't look great on the face of it, but if you look deeper in the minutes he's played and the situations and the games he's been in, he's ended up in a bit of a crossroads. And I think at this moment in time, the only way is out. And it may be that he goes to Dortmund, gets his career going again, gets that form back again, and then we might be going back to Sancho in a few years' time where maybe he might come back to the Premier League. But as it stands at the moment, I just don't see where Sancho goes next.